Swiss Frankie.
Yeah, full tribe in the building. Full tribe static attic. Melchizedek media. Melchizedek music.
www.swissfrankie.com.
Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused, don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused, it's for like blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused, Hebrew we got next. I preach the Melchizedek. Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused, don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused, it's for like blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused, Hebrew we got next. So never abandon your post.
Keep your eyes on the prize. I'm not talking about no dollar sign. The kingdom's at hand, that's the plan, my man. Spiritual gifts is what I store up. Waiting for the sun to show up. Then Babylon gon' burn up, and them gold streets gon' turn up. There'll be love for thy neighbor, will be heavenly favor. God, you love's what you get when you live in the script. So tune in to this vibration. We from his holy nation, here to give words to the ears that hear. Screaming Yahshua's coming till he appears. Cry loud and spare not brood. Now that scripture strong in the faith in this heavenly race. Washed by the blood of Yahweh Shah, that's grace.
Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused, don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused, it's for like blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused, Hebrew we got next. I preach the Melchizedek. Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused, don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused, it's for like blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused, Hebrew we got next. So never abandon your post.
Shalom Mishpaka. Thank you for tuning in, family. I got this video here that I made because I got a few questions. I got a few questions about the coronavirus, Neanderthals, Europeans, Gog and Magog. So without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that black people or so-called African Americans are not contracting the COVID-19 virus, nor am I saying that they're not dying from it. But what I am doing is presenting some evidence to ask some questions, because it seems like there's a certain narrative that's being pushed on the public through the mainstream media that, you know, so-called African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans are dying, you know, disproportionately compared to so-called white people, you know, for lack of a better word. But yet this evidence that's out here, that's been out here for some time now, no one is speaking on it. I mean, it's been out here for at least a month and a half, and I've been waiting for, you know, the mainstream media to speak on it, or even, you know, some other YouTubers or Facebookers to bring it out. I've actually sent this information to a few people in the Hebrew Israelite community to see if they would speak on this or, you know, bring it out. But it seems like no one's bringing it out, so I'm going to take it upon myself to bring it out. And like I said, I'm just asking some questions while presenting this evidence. Right, so what we're looking at here on the screen, we see this is from CNN News, right? This is not something that your little brother Benaiah made up or anything like that. This is actually CNN News. And on CNN News, we see that this article was written December 9th, 2020. Today's date is December 21st, 2020. Now, this is one of the newer articles, but the other articles go back maybe to September. But this article is how Neanderthal DNA affects human health, including the risk of getting COVID-19, right? So it says, early modern humans originated in Africa and started spreading around the world about 80,000 years ago. As they traveled, they came across other ancient humans, including Neanderthals, who had already populated Europe and parts of Asia. Some of them had sex and gave birth to children. Current-day human DNA still carries echoes of these prehistoric sexual encounters. The evidence that Homo sapiens interbred with Neanderthals first emerged in 2010 after Swedish geneticist Svante Paabo pioneered methods to extract, sequence, and analyze ancient DNA from Neanderthal bones. Paabo mapped the entire Neanderthal genome, and thanks to his work, scientists can compare Neanderthal genomes with the genetic records of living humans today. Right? So, thanks to this geneticist, Svante Paabo, who here it says that the evidence first emerged in 2010, but we're going to learn that he started his works around 3 decades ago, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. So we're talking about, you know, the early 2000s, late 1900s, early 2000s, right? Now, I have other videos out showing, or at least one video showing, the connection between Neanderthal and the Bible. And if you get a chance, check out that video. It's called The Devil You Know versus the Devil You Don't. And you will get a deeper understanding on what I'm trying to bring out in here. I don't want to bring that out on this video, but if you get a chance, go check out that video, right? So I'm going to continue with the article. It says, most living people can trace a very small percentage of their DNA to Neanderthals, and that likely includes Africans, who until recently had been taught to have no genetic link to Neanderthals. Scientists have been trying to figure out what, if anything, this genetic legacy means. Research has found links between Neanderthal DNA and fertility, how people feel pain, and immune system functionality. Get this part right here. Neanderthal DNA may affect skin tone and hair color, height, sleeping patterns, mood, and even addiction in present-day Europeans. What's more, Neanderthal DNA may play a small role in swaying the course of COVID-19 infection, right? It's exciting for us to find out that Neanderthals had things that are important for us 50,000 years after they were extinct, said Paabo, director of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, who has been studying Neanderthal DNA for 3 decades. Paabo and his team have turned their attention to medical science's most pressing concern, the coronavirus pandemic, to see if Neanderthal DNA can shed any light on COVID-19. The scientists examined a strand of DNA that has been associated with some of the more serious cases of COVID-19 and compared it to genetic sequences known to have been passed down to living Europeans and Asians from Neanderthal ancestors. The Neanderthal DNA strand is found on chromosome 3. Now remember this chromosome 3 here, because we're going to speak more on that. A team of researchers in Europe has linked certain variations in the sequence with the risk of being more severely ill when infected with COVID-19. So it said that this Neanderthal DNA strand, right, found on chromosome 3, had the researchers in Europe has linked certain variations in this sequence with the risk of being more severely ill when infected by COVID-19. And we're going to find out that not only do they become more severely ill, those who have this Neanderthal genomes, but they also become more susceptible to death. And we're going to read those in these articles, and I'm asking, why isn't anyone speaking on this? Right, so Paabo goes on to say, we've worked for 25 years on Neanderthal genomes, and suddenly they seemed very relevant for a big medical emergency. It was really a huge, huge surprise. The study also revealed considerable differences in how common this genetic risk variant is in different parts of the world. It's particularly common among people in South Asia, where about half of the population carry the Neanderthal risk variant. In Europe, 1 in 6 people carry this risk variant, while in Africa and East Asia, it's almost non-existent. So in Africa, in East Asia, this risk variant is almost non-existent, right? So now they're telling us that this Neanderthal genome, there's people, European and Asians, who definitely have this Neanderthal genome, and they have in the past taught that Africans haven't, but they're suspecting that maybe they have. But as you can see right here, they said if they do have it, it's almost non-existent. And the rest of this, these news articles and videos is going to show that and prove that, right? So when you go to this article and you click on the research it said it was done, right here, recent research has shown, when you click on that, this is what you get. You get that research that was done. And this research was done by Dr. Paabo, right? Now, I'm not going to read this whole article, right? But I'll give you the title, and I'll put the links in the description box for every article that I go through, and you can just read it for yourselves. But this article is Genome-Wide Association Study of Severe COVID-19 with Respiratory Failure, right? And just to show you what they did, right? We conducted a genome association study involving 1,980 patients with COVID-19 at 7 hospitals in the Italian and Spanish epicenters, right? So they did this study in the Italian and Spanish epicenters, and please remember these locations that I'm speaking of, because I'm going to show you who are those people in those locations, where they came from, and where they are today, right? So now, the conclusion of this study was we identified a 3p21.31 gene cluster, right? Now, this is the address of the gene. Remember, it was on chromosome 3, right? So that's why this is 3p21.31 gene cluster as a genetic susceptibility, right, locus in patients with COVID-19 with respiratory failure, and confirmed a potential involvement of the ABO blood group system. So now this article is telling us that certain people with this gene or this ABO blood group system are more susceptible to the COVID-19 virus. Right, so this goes along with the CNN article. Right, this is actually inside. If you clicked on that blue link, it brought you there. Now let me show you another article. Right, that's a little bit older than this one, about a month older. Now this is the News Medical Life Sciences. So notice none of this Benaya made up. None of this Benaya took off of a blogger's post or a conspiracy theorist website or nothing. This is actual medical and mainstream news, right? In fact, this research was done at Yale University. So this says host genetic supervariants may increase COVID-19 deaths. And if you looked over here, you can see the Neanderthal gene variant risk of COVID-19 over here, right? Because these things are related. Now this says researchers at Yale University have identified genetic variants among people of white British ancestry. They specifically singled out white British ancestry. They said these people have this genetic variant, right, that may increase the risk of dying from coronavirus disease 2019, right? The illness caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. The team identified 8 supervariants that contained single nucleotide polymorphism located in genes related to cilia dysfunction, cardiovascular disease, thromboembolic disease, mitochondrial dysfunctions, and the innate immune system. One SNP, which is the single nucleotide polymorphisms, occurred within a gene called DNAH7, which has recently reported to be the most downregulated gene following infection of human bronchial epithelial cells with SARS-CoV-2. The researchers say the findings may provide clues for better understanding the molecular pathogenesis of COVID-19 and the genetic basis underlying differences in susceptibility, which could potentially lead to new therapeutic options. Now it says, host genetic factors contributing to COVID-19 remain largely enigmatic or a mystery. But I don't want to read all of this. Like I said, I'm going to leave this in the link for you to read. But I'm going to get to the conclusion of this, right? So right here we go. 8 genetic variants are identified to significantly increase risk of COVID-19 mortality among the patients with white British ancestry, says Zhang and his colleagues, right? So Zhang and his colleagues did this study and came to the conclusion that those of British ancestry has 8 genetic variants, right? That's linking back to this Neanderthal DNA that we read about in the other 2 articles. It says the researchers say that validating the identified risk factors in independent populations from other resources or ethnic groups is worth further investigation. So Dr. Zhang did this study, and he is separate from Dr. Paabo, who was in Sweden. He's a Swedish doctor. He did his study. Dr. Zhang did his study here in Yale, in the United States. Here's an actual his study report from whatever that is, right? It says genetic variants are identified to increase the risk of COVID-19. So here is Dr. Zhang, right? This is the doctor who did this study that we read in the last page, right? Now, I don't want to read this whole thing again because it's a lot. I've already read it like 7 times. But let me read this background. It says, the severity of coronavirus disease, COVID-19, caused by the severe acute respiratory syndromes, coronavirus 2, right, is highly heterogeneous. I apologize, I screwed that up. It is highly heterogeneous, right? That means it's hereditary. Studies have reported that males in some ethnic groups are at increased risk of death from COVID-19, which implies that individual risk of death might be influenced by host genetic factors. And here's the result, the conclusions, right? 8 genetic variants are identified to significantly increase risk of COVID-19 mortality among the patients with white British ancestry. These findings may provide timely evidence and clues for better understanding the molecular pathogenesis of COVID-19 and genetic basis of heterogeneous susceptibility with potential impact on new therapeutic options. So the study that was done in I'm assuming in Sweden, and this study that was done here in Yale, both came to the same conclusion that but they worded it different, right? That there is a certain genetic variant or a genome chromosome variant, right? That makes a person more susceptible to die of COVID-19. Now, notice in the Neanderthal one, where it clearly said that, you know, those of European and Asian descent have this DNA, this Neanderthal DNA. That was this last sentence right here, right? The study also revealed considerable differences how common this genetic risk variant is in different parts of the world. It's particularly common among people in South Asia, where about half of the population carry the Neanderthal risk variant. In Europe, 1 in 6 people carry it, right? So they're saying in Europe, 1 in 6 people carry this variant, and remember, it is chromosome number 3. Chromosome 3. However, when we get to this article by Dr. Zhang, his actual report that he submitted to his peers to study, he said that the identified risk factors on chromosomes 2, right? The other one said 3. So let's say 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 10, 16, and 17 contain genetic variants in genes related to cilia dysfunctions, right? So these are 8. Now, this one only gave you 1 chromosome, which was chromosome 3. This one gave you 8 more chromosomes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the 8th one is chromosome 3, which is not listed. Right? You see that? 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 10, 16 to 17 would make 8 chromosomes. So I'm not sure how many chromosomes the body has, but we're saying here that there's 8 chromosomes within people that make them more susceptible to not only catch COVID, but have a mortality rate, right? To more likely to die. It's almost as if this virus was genetically designed to kill a certain people. I mean, it seems like, according to their studies, not Brother Benaiah's studies, but to the studies done in Yale, which is a very credible university, one of the top universities here in the United States, as well as this doctor from Sweden. I'm not exactly sure where he did his study at, but he is apparently the go-to man when you want to talk about Neanderthal DNA and genomes, because he is the one who's been in that study for 30 years. Now, my question, I guess this is my second question. My second question is, because for those conspiracy theorists out there who says, first of all, they say that the coronavirus isn't real, right? Well, you can't do a study on something that's not real. So, you know, whether you want to say it's not really killing people, you might could try to get away with that, but you cannot say it's not real, because these scientists are doing, you know, research on something that they think is COVID-19. So, you know, they're doing research on something. So my question would be, let me see if I can phrase this correct. Okay, so if this virus was created by, let's say, the white man, there's some conspiracy theorists that says it was created by the white man. There's some conspiracy theories that says that it was created by the Asian man or the Chinese man to destroy the white man, and somehow, you know, I guess a valve fell out of somebody's hand and broke on the floor, and the virus escaped and infected its own people or whatever. But this virus seems like it's genetically programmed, but it seems like it's attacking those with the same genetics as the conspiracy theorists are saying created this virus. In other words, you're saying, that the white man created this virus, but it's killing the white man and the Asian. Or you're saying the Asian man invented this virus or made this virus and it's killing the white man or the Asian. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm asking these questions, and I'm also asking if they have done these studies and they see that it's red alert for those who are of white British descent, right? And have the Neanderthal DNA, then why is the mainstream media only speaking on so-called blacks and African Americans and everybody else of color getting vaccinated first? When, according to your studies, it seems like these people who have these genomes desperately needs a vaccination. To the point where, if I take you to this next article, you will be able to see that this is in Thailand Medical, right? This was November 13th, 2020. Thailand Medical. So it appears that in other nations that are not ran by the people who are of British descent, is it a coincidence that majority of the world is colonized by the British descent? But it's not just the British, it's also the French, the Spanish, certain people of a certain stock, I should say, have this genome variant, right? So now this is in Thailand. So it's telling me that, people of other nations know this, but for some reason it's not news in the United States, right? It says breaking. COVID-19 genetics at Yale University identified 8 supergenetic variants in white people that increase COVID-19 death risk. Scientists from Yale University in a new research have identified genetic variants among people of white British ancestry that may increase the risk of dying from COVID-19. The study team considered the mortality as the trait of interest and performed a genome-wide association study, right? And we read this in the other articles. So I'm going to show the conclusion. They found the same thing, right? The researchers found 8 supervariants that contain single nucleotide polymorphism located in genes that were consistently identified across multiple replications as susceptibility loci for COVID-19 mortality. The identified risk factors on chromosomes 2, 6, 7, and 8, that's 4, 10, 16, and 17, that makes 7, plus genome 3, or chromosome 3, that makes 8, contain genetic variants and genes related to cilia dysfunctions, right? So this is news in other countries that apparently, people of British descent is dying of this COVID-19 more than anyone else. More than anyone else. That's interesting, because when we go to, let's say, the COVID ID map. So I'm going to bring this up to show you how to get to the COVID ID map, right? If you just type in COVID-19 maps, it'll give you a list of these, right? And then if you click on the geographical distribution of COVID-19, it gives you an up-to-date data board. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the COVID-19 dashboard by the Center for Systems Science and Engineering at Johns Hopkins University. And down here, if you can see my cursor down here in the bottom left corner, it says last updated at 12/21/2020, which is today, at 1:22 p.m. And right now it's 2:37 p.m. Eastern Time at the time of this recording. So looking at what we have learned so far, that there's certain people of European, if you can see my cursor, of European descent and of Asian descent, right, who has this Neanderthal DNA or Neanderthal genome, right? Also, we see right here in this little corner right here, you can barely see it, but right here is Spain. This little part I'm circling right here, that's Spain. And this part over here is England, Britain, and Ireland, right? Now, they're saying that these people here of British descent are more susceptible of dying from COVID-19. And what makes that interesting is because these people colonized the America over here, which is covered in red, right? So just like the UK is covered in red here, so is America, right? But where else did the UK or British colonize, right? They did some colonization in Southern America, right? But mostly South Africa, right? So remember, the thing said that, there's barely, the article said, that there's very few people of African descent who have this genome, right? And that's why there's very little dots here in this, in Africa as compared to anywhere else, right? So, so far, the red dots is matching up. Now, we do have questions about these red dots over here in the Levant region right here where I'm circling, right? And over here in, I guess this is like Iraq, Iran area, right, in Southern Asia. But the article did say those of Southern Asia, right? So that's Iran, Iraq area down there. Now, so we've learned that so-called British descendants are more susceptible to catching the COVID-19 and dying from it, right? And we read that in this article over here under News Medical Life Sciences, right? We read that information about how researchers at Yale University have identified genetic variants among people of white British ancestry that may increase the risk of dying of coronavirus. And that same medical website has this article written December 5th, 2020. So they know this, right? This one here that was written that white people or people of British ancestry, and when I say white people, please don't get triggered because I'm not saying this. This is what the article says. It says white British ancestry, right? I'm not being racist. I'm not being none of that. I'm showing you what these people who have done this science, which is also white people, and what their results have found. So this one was November 11th, 2020, right? And this article here is December 5th, a month after, right? So they're studying this, right? And it says black patients hospitalized with COVID-19 less likely to have severe illness, that's what the other article said, and die compared to whites. Now it says, while multiple research studies show that black and Hispanic patients are more likely to test positive for COVID-19, a team of investigators at NYU Langone Health has found that once hospitalized, black patients, after controlling for other serious health conditions and neighborhood income, which is interesting in itself, because why would your neighborhood income affect whether or not you survive COVID. It's showing you that, if you don't have the proper income, they're not going to give you the proper procedures, and they will let you die. But it says they were less likely to have severe illness, die, or be discharged to a hospice compared to white patients. Wait a minute. So, December 5th, which was 2 weeks ago, you guys knew that blacks and Hispanics was less likely to die. But yet, today, you are showing us black nurses, black doctors, black hospital and healthcare workers taking this vaccine because you guys are saying that you are so concerned about our health that you want to give us this vaccine first, when your science says that you guys are dying faster and more disproportionate than anyone because of Neanderthal gene. As a matter of fact, here is the article with the Neanderthal gene in it, right? And like I said, I've never seen a black caveman before. But this is what's being pushed on us, right? So it goes on and says, the study recently published online in JAMA Network Open, so it's available to anybody. According to its authors, one of the first to examine the impact of comorbid conditions and neighborhood socialism, right? So findings indicate that blacks and Hispanic populations are not inherently more susceptible to poor COVID-19 outcomes compared to other groups. And notice it says inherently, right? Because over here it said that heterogeneous, right? Or inherited, right? So over here in this article, it says findings indicate that black and Hispanic populations are not inherently more susceptible to poor COVID-19 outcomes, and that once hospitalized, their outcomes are equal to or better than their white counterparts. Now, this is what Dr. I don't know how to pronounce that name, right? Said. It says, we know that black and Hispanic populations account for a disproportionate share of COVID-19 related deaths relative to their population size in New York and major cities across the country. We were, however, surprised to find that black and Hispanic patients were no more likely to be hospitalized across NYU Langholm than white patients, which means we need to look at other structural factors at play that are negatively affecting the outcomes in these communities. These factors include poor housing conditions, unequal access to health care, differential employment opportunities, and poverty that they must be addressed. So what this doctor is saying is that the reason why they're able to report and say that blacks and Hispanics are dying more disproportionate than others is because they're more susceptible or more exposed to the vaccine because of they're the essential workers, right? And because of their housing conditions and unequal access to health care, right? So how much money you make depends on how if you survive it or not. But once you take that away, right, it says that they're dying way less than us, right? Especially statistically wise. Now, here's the findings that they found, right? Among the 4,843 patients who tested positive for COVID-19, 39% were white, 15.5% were black, almost 26% were Hispanic, and 7% were Asian, and 7.4% were multiracial, right? Out of those 4,843, 2,623 of them actually were hospitalized. So out of the 4,800 that tested positive, only less than half of them, well, that's more than half. More than half of them were hospitalized, right? Now let's look at the percentage of the ones that were hospitalized. Of the 2,623 patients that were hospitalized, 39% were white, which is very on, point with the 39% were white of the patients, right? 14.3% were black, right? So now, of those who were tested positive, and only 15% of them was black, less than 15% actually went to the hospital. 25.9% were Hispanic, right? Or, I'm sorry, 27.3% were Hispanic. This is matching up here, right? 6.9% were Asian, or 7%, right? And 7.9% were multiracial, which is matching right here. 7.4% was matching. So far, the numbers are on point. But it goes on and says, hospitalized patients were older, right? Hospitalized patients were older and had higher comorbidity than patients who tested positive but were not hospitalized. 70% were discharged. So of those 2,623, 70% were discharged. 36.3% experienced critical illness, and 24% of them died, right? Or were discharged to a hospice, and 4.5 remained in the hospital. Now check this out. It says, but of those numbers, black and Hispanic patients had a lower risk of critical illness and were likely to die or be discharged, and were less likely to die or be discharged to a hospice. After adjusting for age, sex, insurance status, and comorbidity, black patients continue to have a lower risk of death compared to white patients, while Hispanics and Asian patients had similar rates to whites. Now, I'm not making any of this up. So we have 3 studies, one from a doctor in Sweden. We have one from the scientists at Yale University, and we also have one here from the scientists from New York University in Langone, right? And this doctor goes on and says, our findings provide more evidence that the social determinants of health play a critical role in determining patients' outcome, particularly for black patients, right? He's saying that, because of a systematic racism is why black people are dying. But if you were to level the playing field, white people with the Neanderthal DNA, right? And it says here, descendants of British ancestry have 8 chromosomes that make them more susceptible to die. More likely to not only catch the virus, but more susceptible to death. But it's not limited to just the British descendants. And here's why. Okay, what you're looking at here, right, is the extent of the Roman Empire. And the reason why I brought you here is because I have to show you who these people of Britain are, right? As you see up here in this top left corner, right, you see Britannia, right, which was part of the Roman Empire. Now, this red part that you're looking at the map, you're seeing that this is the extent of the Roman Empire. In other words, this is the largest it has gotten. Now, right here, if you follow in my cursor, the border of Rome and Germania, or what you call German, right? There was a group of people who lived up here in this Germania, Sarmatia, or Sarmatia area, who were closely related to the people who dwelt in this Roman Empire. I'm going to show you who those people were before Rome took over that territory, right? So if we look at the Romans, right? Here's the Roman Empire right here, right? So we see the Roman Empire. Now we're going to look at that empire. Where was that? Where the sons of Shem, here we go. The sons of Shem, where the sons of Shem settled, right? So now there's a lot of maps that shows where the sons of Shem or the sons of Noah settled, and some of them differ a little from here and there, but most of them, if not all of them, agree that up here in this northern Europe part, right, is the descendants of Gomer and Magog, right? Gomer and Magog up here, right? And over here we have Javon, Elishahai, Tiras, right? These are the Greeks. These are the Greeks and Romans. Now, these Greeks and Romans, they mixed together and became one people, right? So now remember, the thing said that those people who stayed in Eastern Europe and Western Asia had this Neanderthal DNA, as well as down here in Southern Asia has Neanderthal DNA, right? But I'm going to show you how these people, Gomer and Magog, how these people left this land, right, and came through Europe and entered into Rome's territory and invaded all this territory right here, right? Not just this, but also the territory of Britannia, or Britain, right here, and dwelt with these people, and they dwelt with these people from somewhere around 300 AD, right? They've been living with these people since 300 AD. Now, I want you to consider this. Some people might say, well, just because you dwell with somebody doesn't mean that y'all become the same people. And I beg to differ. And here's why, right? So, us so-called African Americans, right, supposedly have been in America for 400 years, right? Now, although, our mothers and sisters and daughters were raped by the white man, right? That wasn't, a whole lot to produce. And I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying it wasn't, a significant amount. But what I'm saying is it didn't change the landscape or the complexion of the people as a whole. As a whole. It wasn't until the last 100 years where we really started having interracial relationships. It wasn't until the last 40 or so years, maybe 60, that it's been accepted, right? So it wasn't like today where you just commonly see a black man with a white woman. It wasn't like today where you see a commercial with a white woman with a black man. That was not how it was. So we're saying that has only been permitted, been happening, been allowed on this level for, say, maybe 60 years, right? However, but in those 60 years, we have a high population of what you might call mulatto or racially mixed people. I call them Drakes. So we have in every city, there's a side of town that's full of Drakes, of, mulattoes or yellow or light skin or mixed people. And we're talking about in this short 400 years that we've been here, and really only a good 100 years of racial mixing, Yet we have this population. Now imagine 1,000 years or 1,500 years of people dwelling together. Surely they're swapping all kinds of spit, all kinds of blood, and all kinds of other bodily fluids, where they are going to become one people and the same people. So that's important, because when we look at these maps and we see how the Visigoths invaded the Roman Empire, right, and took over the Roman Empire. I'm going to use this one. Do I got a better one? Let me see. So up here in this area, right, if you're looking at this map, if you're following my cursor, now first of all, these Huns, the Huns are what you might call Mongols or Asiatic people that came over from West Asia, which is over here, right? But the people who was in what you consider to be Germany and Russia and Sweden and Denmark and Norway, those northern areas of Europe, right? These people were Picts, Jutes, Angles, Saxons, Vandals, right? Visigoths, and Ostrogoths. Basically, Goths. This is what they were, right? And these are the ones who actually sacked Rome. It was the Goths who actually sacked Rome. And what had happened is, if you can see up here is where you might call Sweden and Denmark. Up right here in this part where it says Den-E, right? 10E, right? And these people left this land looking for more land to colonize, because, you know, the land that they lived here in Iceland and Greenland and Norway and Sweden was very unforgiving. It was cold, it was tundrous, it was frozen, it was hard, you know, and, you know, they were outpopulating, so they moved from north down to the south, and they landed like in these British Isles over here, right? Which became England and ultimately became the British Empire, right? As well as Ireland and Scotland, right? They also came down into this area right here where it says Franks. This is where we call France now, right? And then down here in Spain, this is where Spain and Portugal is. And they even crossed the Mediterranean Strait over to North Africa, into Carthage and things like that, right? So these are the Visigoth, the Vandals. They were what you call Vikings, right? They were what you call Vikings who came to plunder and spoil. But what they done is that they came and they set up their people amongst the Celts, who originally stayed in the British Isles, and the original people from Italy and Spain and Rome, which were most of them were Greeks and Romans. But all these people were basically descendants of Javan. Now, when I say Javan or Javan, I need to show you where these people come from. So looking again at this map, where the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth settled, right? We have the descendants of Gomer and Javan up here at the top, right? Gomer and Javan, right? And this is where these sons dwelt and their children, right? Now notice over here in this, which would be Russia, near the Caucasus Mountains, is where Magog is. Now Magog and the sons of Gomer like I said, invades into what would become Western Rome. Because Eastern Rome would split somewhere around here, around Greece, right? And it will be this area down here. So this area up here will be Western Rome. And those Vikings, or sons of Magog, left their lands of Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. Now, I'm looking at the top of the globe. Right here is the boot of Italy, right? This is Greece. This borderline right here, this red line, was the end of the Roman Empire. The rest of this area, which was Germania and Russia, and then you got Southern Asia over here. The rest of this territory is the land of Gomer and Magog, right? Up here at the top, this right here is Sweden and Denmark. Over here, this is Greenland, this is Iceland, right? So the Vikings came from these areas. The sons of Magog, the Goths, came from these areas and traveled down to the British Isles right here, which now is the UK, or the United Kingdoms, right? And they also came in to Europe this way. All of them sons of Magog, right? And they went into these lands. They came into these lands over here, and they conquered these people. The Goths are the ones who sacked Rome, right? And these people had no choice but to let them dwell amongst them. Now, this was 300 AD, like I said. So today we're in 20,000, the year 2020, right? Spain and Portugal and Britain, they all came to America around the 1400s, right? 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So let's say, late 15th, early 16th century, these people who had been dwelling together since 300 AD were at that time together 1,100 years. There's no way you can tell me that they were still that separate. Now, I'm not saying that there's, some people who, probably are still pure blood, whatever they were, but for the most part, people who dwell together for 1,000 or plus years become the same people. So by the time they came out to colonize the rest of the world, they were the same people. This is what their kingdom looked like. Here is the Gothic kingdoms. Let me blow that up. So as you can see, this here is 530 AD. And these things are already settled. This is after Rome has already fell. All these kingdoms became Gothic kingdoms. You have the kingdom of the Ostrogoths, who took over this area, right? Kingdom of the Visigoths, right? Kingdom of the Burgundians, the Frankish people. And this is 530 AD. The Germanic tribes over here were still considered, this is what you would call Russia right now. They were still considered to be barbarians, and that territory was supposedly unknown, at least by the Romans at that point. If you look over here to the British Isles, right, that ended up getting split to the Anglo-Saxons, right, which were another Viking that came from right across this water from Denmark and Sweden, and they were called Nordsmen. Nordsmen means Northmen, men from the north, right? And they settled and they all dwelt together right here in this area. Again, on this map, when we're looking at 526 AD, right? We're looking at the Ostrogoths, took over this area, right? The Visigoths over here, same thing. The Burgundians, or Bulgarians, I'm not sure exactly what that says. The Frankforts, the Saxons, and the Celts, all dwelling right here together for thousands of years. Like I said, there's been plenty of bodily fluids swapped amongst these people for years. Now, on this other side, this Byzantine Empire, these people considered themselves to still be pure Greek, right? And not mixed with the barbarians like the Western Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire claimed to be still Greek and the pure-blooded Romans. Now, if we go to the UNRV, Roman history, right, and get a first-hand account from the General Tacitus, and his description of those German tribes north of Rome. In chapter 4, Tacitus says, when he's describing those German tribes, right, above on the outside of the Roman border, he says, "For my own part, I agree with those who think that the tribes of Germany are free from all taint of intermarriages." So he's saying that they were pure blood with foreign nations, and that they appear as a distinct, unmixed race, like none but themselves. Hence, too, the same physical peculiarities throughout so vast a population. All have, here we go, fierce blue eyes, red hair, huge frames, fit only for a sudden exertion, or to lunge, or a quick movement. They are less able to bear laborious work. Heat and thirst they cannot in the least endure. To cold and hunger, their climate and their soil ignore them. So Tacitus was saying that, that they only got a short burst of energy, basically. But he described them as having fierce blue eyes, red hair, huge frames. Now, remember, most Grecians and Romans and people of that Mediterranean area have black hair. Like a darkish black or brown eyes. Originally, and if you find the pure blood ones, they will have black hair like that, right? There's not too many, that had red hair, blue eyes. Now remember back on this article, right? It told us that the Neanderthal DNA affected your skin color, your skin tone, hair color, height, right? I'm sorry, this thing is skin tone, hair color, and height. Going back to where we were, Tacitus described these people as having fierce blue eyes, red hair, and huge frames. All that is relevant because these people who are Gothic, or who you call Gog people, all dwelt with those other people for thousands of years. So therefore that bloodline, is all mixed together. Now, here's another example of a description from the Greeks and the Romans about the red-haired people as well as the blonde-haired people. Because remember, they were black-haired people. So it says here, in Western culture, blonde hair has long been associated with female beauty. Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love and beauty, was described as having blonde hair, right? But in ancient Greece and Rome, blonde hair was frequently associated with prostitutes who dyed their hair using saffron dyes in order to attract customers. The Greeks stereotyped Thracians and slaves as blonde, and the Romans associated blondness with the Celts and the Germans to the north. In Western Europe, during the Middle Ages, long blonde hair was idolized as the paragon of female beauty. The Norse goddess Sif, right? Now, Norse is another word for north or Nordsmen, right? So the people from the north had a goddess named Sif, and the medieval heroine Azuot were both significantly portrayed as blonde, and in medieval artwork, right? So the Romans and the Greeks describe the Celts and the Germans as blonde. Why did I bring that out? I brought that out to show this. Did you know that there's a people who proudly claim the descendants of Gog and Magog? And those very same people match up everything that we just learned so far of them being Nordsmen or northern people, Gothic people, which is another way of saying Gog, right? Whether it be Visigoth or Saxon or Ostrogoths, these are people from the sons of Magog. And those people, not only did everything we read tell us that, but those people themselves claim to be Magog, or the sons of Gog. Now, this is the Britannica, and in it reads this: in the Hebrew Bible, the prophesied invader of Israel and the land from which he comes, respectively, are in the Christian scriptures, New Testament, evil forces opposed to the people of God. Although biblically references to Gog and Magog are relatively few, they assumed an important place in apocalyptic literature and medieval legend. They are also discussed in the Quran. See Yajuj and Majuj. It also reads in the Britannica that an independent legend of Gog and Magog surrounds two colossal wooden effigies in the Guildhall, London. Right? They are thought to represent two giants who were taken to London to serve as porters at the gate of the royal place after their race was destroyed by Brutus the Trojan. The legendary founder of London, right? Effigies of Gog and Magog have existed in London from the time of Henry V, who reigned in 1413. The first figure was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1666 and was replaced in 1708. The second pair was destroyed in a German air raid in 1940 and again replaced in 1953. So these statues of these Gog and Magogs, right, not only have they been destroyed several times, but it is so important to them that they keep rebuilding them or replacing them. It says, in the legends recounted by the medieval English historian Geoffrey of Monmouth, Gog Magog, or Gomagot, was a giant chieftain of Cornwall who was slain by Brutus' companion Cornelius. Now here in the Wikipedia, this is what it says about Gog and Magog, right? It says, a legend was attached to Gog and Magog by the time of the Roman period. that the gates of Alexander were erected by Alexander the Great to repel the tribe. Right? This is the Great Wall of Alexander that cut off those barbarians on the other side. It says Romanized Jewish historian Josephus knew them as the nation descended from Magog, the Japhetite, or sons of Japhet, as in Genesis, and explained them to be the Scythians. In the hands of early Christian writers, they became apocalyptic hordes, and throughout the medieval period, variously identified as the Vikings, Huns, Khazars, and Mongols, Turanians, and nomads. Now, you would think after reading all of that no one would want to claim to be Gog and Magog. However, so after knowing what you know about Gog and Magog, right? Did you ever think anyone would want to claim and do claim that they are Gog and Magog? And if they do claim to be Gog and Magog, how, who am I to argue against them? Right? Now, in the Wikipedia it reads, right, Gog Magog was a legendary giant in Welsh, this is England, and later English mythology, according to Geoffrey of Monmouth. He was a giant inhabitant of Albion, is an alternative name for Britain. So the inhabitants of Britain and Scotland and the Celts claim to be descendants of Gog Magog. He was thrown off a cliff during a wrestling match with Quirinius. Gog Magog was the last of the giants found by Brutus and his men inhabiting the land of Albion. The effigies of Gog Magog and Quirinius used in English pageantry and later instituted as guardian statues at Guildhall in London eventually earned the familiar names Gog and Magog. So here it says the guardians of London, right, is Gog and Magog. It says the Lord Mayor's account of Gog Magog says that the Roman Emperor Diocletian had 33 wicked daughters. He found 33 husbands for them to curb their wicked ways. They chafed at this, and under the leadership of the eldest sister Alba, they murdered their husbands. For this crime they were set adrift at sea. They washed ashore on a wide-swept island which they named Albion, or Britain. After Alba, here they coupled with demons and gave birth to a race of giants whose descendants included Gog and Magog. So the folklore is that these people of Britannia, right, are descendants of Gog Magog, the giants. The effigies of the two giants were recorded in 1558 at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth I and were described as Gog Magog the Albion and Quirinius the Briton. These are similar figures made of wickerwork and pasteboard, made regular appearances in the Lord Mayor's show thereafter. Although they became known as Gog and Magog over the years, new figures were carved from pine in 1709 by Captain Richard Saunders and displayed in the Gold Hill until 1940. When they were destroyed in an air raid, they were replaced by David Evans. Images of Gog and Magog depicted as giants are carried by Lord Mayors of the City of London in a traditional procession in the Lord's Mayor's Show each year on the second Saturday of November. Let's take a look at that.
Sculptor David Evans puts the finishing touches to two old friends of Londoners, Gog and Magog. 12 years ago, effigies of the two giants were destroyed when the city's Guildhall was blitzed. But now, exact replicas copied from models are all set to go back to town to take their place. Outside Guildhall, where Gog and Magog have made their home since the reign of Henry V, crowds welcome their return. Weighing 3/4 of a ton each and standing 9'3", they dwarf the onlookers. Although no one's sure why they should live in Guildhall at all, it's certainly like old times to have Gog and Magog in London again.
Okay, family, I'm going to wrap it on up now. For those of you who stayed in the video, thank you. And there is a reward because I'm about to get into the meat and the whole point of this video right now. So I went through all that to show you how these Neanderthals, who are of British descent, also of Gothic descent, have 8 different chromosome variants that make them more susceptible to not only the COVID-19 virus, but also more susceptible to death. So I went through and showed you how those people are Gog and Magog and how they came from this area here down into Europe and dwelt with the original inhabitants there sometime in 300 AD, living there with them for a little over 1100 years before crossing the Atlantic Ocean and coming to colonize the Americas as well as South Africa. This is what that land looked like prior to those Gothic people coming down into Rome and conquering Rome, and this is how they came down. From Norway, from Sweden, from Denmark, from northern Russia, Germany, and they came down into these lands of the Frankfurts, the Celtics over here in the British Isles, the Spains, and all the way down to Italy. And they established what is called the Gothic kingdoms. Right? So these kingdoms right here are the Gothic kingdoms, sons of Magog, and they proudly proclaim to be so. Now, what is most interesting about this is these are the people who colonized the world. If we zoom in on this area right here, we see these same areas that we're talking about. Denmark, right? Franca or France, Spain, Portugal, the United Kingdom of Britain, right? These countries who are of the Visigoths are responsible for all these colors down here that shows the colonization of the world. Now, as you can see, the red is the English who colonized America, Alaska, Southern Asia, Australia, the southern tip of South Africa, right? Some parts of mid-Africa. We have the Francas, which is the blue, who've colonized a lot of mid and southern southwestern Africa, right? We got pockets of the British in there. We got purple. Now, this purple, just like Canada, as you can see down here, purple is a combination of the English and the French. Red and blue makes purple. So these purple areas where these same people colonized these areas. Yellow, of course, is Spain, right? And they got parts of Africa right here, along down South Africa, Mid-America, Mid-America down to South America, all the way down, right? And the green is Portugal, which have Eastern South America, a little spot on Southwest Africa and Southeast Africa. So these very same countries that were once Visigoth kingdom that got taken over by the Visigoths and the sons of Magog, who proudly claim to be the sons of Magog, colonized these areas, and these areas are the same areas that's hit most with the coronavirus. Now, look at this map. We got all of the United States. We got little spots in Canada, up in Alaska, all the way down Mid-America to South America, West America. We got the southern tip of Africa over here, right? We got little spots and dots throughout Africa, all of Europe, Southern Asia, right? And Australia. The very same places that were colonized by the Visigoth countries. Now you see these little red dots and stuff. These little red dots, these little red islands. These are little islands colonized by the red or the Brits. Purple is Brits and French. Green is Portugal, right? Blue is France. So those little islands, those little dots that you see there are the same little dots that's on this map. Over here on the right corner. Having the same COVID-19 infection and death. So is it a coincidence that the same people of the same stock that colonized the world appear to be the people who are most affected and more likely to die of the COVID-19? Is it just me, or does anyone else see the resemblance in this map and the other? Could it be that the people who have taken the children of Israel into captivity via the transatlantic slave trade, also the Arab slave trade that's down here in this Babylonian or Iraq, Iran area, could it be that these people who have laid their hands on the children of Israel are being punished for their doings? Because all the evidence appears to be so, from the Neanderthal genome all the way to the 8 variants, found in white British people who are the same people as the Francas, Germans, Spains, and everything else. Could it be? And if you do not believe in the Bible, right, or you don't believe so-called African Americans or the children of Israel, or you don't believe Native Americans or Latinos or the children of Israel, surely you believe in the transatlantic slave trade, right? Because that has been proven. Surely you believe in the colonizations of the world, because we clearly have a map of the colonizations of the world. So if nothing else, you would have to come to the conclusion that at least the people who have colonized the world are the most susceptible to the COVID-19 and more likely to die than anyone else. And then you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is that? Why did the God of this world, right? Well, I should say the God of the universe, because the God of this world is Satan. But why would the creator of all heaven and earth create a virus that only attacked these people unless he was punishing these people for some reason? And you can't tell me that another white man created this virus to kill these other white people. Nor can you tell me another Asian man made this virus to kill the other Asian people, because they're just as affected as everyone else. Also, it is said that, the countries in Asia and China are not accurately reporting their infections and death. However, their area is still awfully red. Even Australia. Now, why is it important? And do we have further proof of this? Well, now I'm going to show you 2 video clips that says that, the COVID-19 virus strand has mutated, right? And what's interesting enough is that it mutated in the area where these British people are, or honestly, where these Gothic people are, the sons of God, right? The colonizers. These 2 videos I'm about to show right now is going to show that where the strand mutated is where these people are, as if the Most High don't want these people to be able to get a vaccine and be saved. So let's look at that.
All right, Morgan, thank you. Now to that new and more contagious strain of COVID in the UK. It's creating a global travel nightmare. Today, country after country banned flights from the United Kingdom, determined to keep the virus out. And now there are calls from inside the U.S. to do the same. Sarah Harmon has late-breaking details from London.
Tonight, the British Isles are increasingly isolated as countries around the world race to block all flights from the United Kingdom and stop the spread of a new mutant strain of COVID-19.
The new variant is out of control and we need to bring it under control.
The announcement left passengers stranded just days before Christmas. British travelers are now barred from large parts of Europe, including Italy, Ireland, France, and Germany, as well as Israel, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. The new coronavirus strain isn't more deadly, nor is it thought to be more resistant to vaccines, but it does appear to spread 70% faster than the original virus. So far, the U.S. is still allowing flights from the U.K. to land normally.
A number of countries have now restricted flights from the U.K. Should America consider doing that?
Yeah, my sense is that we can consider it, but I don't know that it'll make a big difference. These strains are popping up in multiple different places in the UK, in Denmark, in the Philippines, and I suspect some strains like that may already be circulating in the United States.
Back in London, dramatic scenes late Saturday as thousands raced to catch the last trains out of town.
It is with a very heavy heart, I must tell you, we cannot continue with Christmas.
After the Prime Minister announced fresh lockdowns to try to stem the spread of the mutant strain. Christmas here is effectively canceled as millions brace for a holiday like never before.
Good morning, Kathy. A new strain of COVID that is 70% more contagious than the previous one is out of control. That's according to the British government. And the UK is now being effectively quarantined by the rest of Europe. All land, sea and air links to France, for example, have been cut. Flights to and from Britain cancelled by 24 countries. Canada is one, but so far, not the US. The new strain was first detected in September in the southeast of England. It's not thought to be more deadly, but there is now a race between injections and infections. And the new strain is also in Australia, where the biggest city, Sydney, is being cut off. The government is banning Sydney residents from travelling anywhere within the country. This after an outbreak of just 83 cases in beach areas.
So, family, isn't it interesting that the same place right here, the UK, right, it's banned from everywhere else except for America to travel, which is odd because if this new strand or new virus strand popped up in the UK, it's going to pop up wherever the rest of those people are, which is in all these spots where you see the red dot. Down here in Australia, here's Sydney. Sydney's cut off from the rest of Australia, right? Because this is the city colonized by the Britons, right? And all these other places, like right here in Iran and Iraq, they also have put bans on the UK and Australians, or people from Sydney to be specific, to travel to their lands when these it's my prediction that these new mutated strands is going to pop up in these same places where we see these red dots, because that's where these Goth and Magog people are. So, these are my questions. My first question is, why isn't anyone speaking on this Neanderthal DNA, nor is anyone speaking on these descendants of white British people having these genomes that's more susceptible to infection of COVID-19 and death? That's my first question. My second question is, if this is true, which everything that we've presented so far in this video shows that it's true. So if it's true, then why is there such an effort to push this vaccine on African Americans and not push the vaccine on those who need it the most? Is there something about this vaccine we need to know? Because I'm not the smartest man in the world, but it appears to me that you guys, or I take that back, those people of British descent needs the vaccine more than anybody. Now, maybe you need so-called African Americans and everyone else to take the vaccine because, as we saw in the other news clippings, that, you know, we could be asymptomatic, right? And carry it and not even show symptoms. But that doesn't help you, does it? It doesn't help you if you still die of the virus and we don't. So that's my third question. My fourth question is, why are these people with the Neanderthal DNA and of Gothic descent suffering the most from COVID-19 and dying the most? Is it something more than their genetics? Is it something spiritual? Is it judgment? Is it a punishment? These are the questions I have. And my fifth question is, why isn't any other Israelite speaking on this? Please, somebody blow this out the water. Shalom and good night, fam.
Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. Israelite blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrews, we got next. I preach the Magog the dead. Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. Israelite blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrews, we got next. So never abandon your post.